Thank you so much. Wow, thank you. Thank you. Wow, thanks. This is awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know why more presidential candidates don't come to Boise. I mean, this is pretty amazing. Wow. Thank you all so much. Ron, thank you. Thank you for that great vote of support and for that kind introduction. It is, wow, it is really great to be here. Thank you so much. Let me start out by introducing, Ron talked about the importance of family. And it is important to me. Karen and I, my wife and I have been married for 21 years, and we have 7 children, right? Just so you know, last time I said that when I was in New York City in front of a group, I said I have 7 children. There wasn't applause. There was this buzz, like it was almost a gasp. I bet you there are a few people who have 7 or more children here. What do you think? How many? Come on, a few? Say a few. Okay, that's good. All right. So we try to, it's hard because our children are age 20 all the way down to 3. So it's not necessarily the best time of my life to be out running for President of the United States and trying to juggle, managing the lives of kids in college, kids and teenagers, as well as we have our little girl Bella. And we've been very blessed. We've had a wonderful opportunity for this to be really a family affair. And I have some of the kids, in the case of our older 2 kids who are supposed to be in college, but they took a year off college to help work on the campaign. I call them my twofers and the reason they're a twofer is because, number one, I get free labor on the campaign, right? And trust me, up until about a week or 2, we needed a lot of free labor. And the second thing is I don't have to pay their college tuition this year, so it was a good thing. So let me introduce you my number 1 twofer, our oldest daughter, and her name is Elizabeth, and she is right there, over there. I have to mention just to say thank you. And I say thank you to all of you who, I mentioned our little girl Bella, who is, many of you know, we took a couple of days off the campaign trail because she was rather ill and ended up having to go to the hospital. And she is a special little girl. She was born with a condition called trisomy 18, which is a condition where you're supposed to have 2 chromosomes, 1 through 23 pairs. And she was born with an extra 18th chromosome. Most of the cases, that is it's not a good thing either way, but it's similar to Down syndrome. Down syndrome is trisomy 21. Well, trisomy 18 is much more severe, unfortunately, and has a very, very high mortality rate. It has a 1% survival rate for a year. And she has been a little miracle, I mean a true miracle. And she is the most beautiful, special. I just talked to her, and she doesn't talk, but she talks in her own way to me. And she is a absolute gift to our family. She has had a full recovery. And I just want to say that she's been sick before, and it's always a life-threatening situation when she gets a respiratory, just any kind of cold. And she bounced back from this faster than anything she's ever done in her life. And I just know it was all those folks across America praying for us. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But family is important to me. And it's important to this country. A lot of folks say, well, Rick, you're the social conservative candidate in this race. And I say, well, if that means that I'm the only candidate in this race who actually goes out and talks about issues of faith and family, I'll accept that. But as you will hear, I talk about all the issues. I talk about our national security concerns. I've been a leader in the area of Iran in pointing the real dangerous situation. For now 7 years, I was the author of a bill way back in 2004 that said Iran had a nuclear program and we needed to put sanctions against them to stop them. When I did that, no, not a single United States senator would sign on to that bill in 2004. And within 2 years, that bill had 60 co-sponsors, even though it was opposed by President Bush, and I might add, Senator Obama and Senator Biden. But eventually we were able to get that bill passed because people were able to see over those 2-year period of time, people were able to see what we're now everyone is seeing, which is Iran is a huge and central. Okay, do I need to, Ron, do I need to stand any particular place? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not giving feedback to people. But Iran is not just an existential threat to the state of Israel. You saw the mullahs come out and Ahmadinejad come out and say that Israel is a cancer that must be excised from the Middle East. I agree with you, boo. But this is a country that is developing a nuclear weapon. They're being upfront about it. This isn't Iraq, where we suspected, and he denied it, and he suspected, and we had really, sort of sketchy evidence, but evidence nonetheless, but sketchy and intelligence. This is one that is blatant. There are nuclear facilities, 40 of them, that they've identified, and that they admit to, that they have nuclear facilities. They talk about refining uranium. They talk about having nuclear science. They talk about they're building missiles that are capable of handling and carrying nuclear warheads. This is a country that is very clear about what they are up to. And we have a president that's in denial. We have a president who is trying to appease, and I believe ultimately believes they can contain Iran. And I think if you see the past actions of Iran, everything from their bombing of our embassies, to Marine barracks, to ships, to killing our men and women in uniform in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yes, Iranians killing. How? IEDs, improvised explosive device, the #1 killer of our men and women in uniform. Manufactured in Iran. People are trained to use them in Iran. Iran has been killing our men and women for the last 10 years on the battlefield. They've been planning and supporting terrorist attacks all over the world, and particularly with Hezbollah in Lebanon and northern Israel, and Hamas. They are a country that have been at war with us. They have hostages today in Iran, American hostages, today in Iran. This is a country that, according to General Clapper, just a few days ago announced he's the head of national intelligence, said that Iran is planning a whole series of terrorist attacks in this country. And now they want to get a nuclear weapon. Imagine what they'll be like when they feel like no one can attack them. Because if they do, they'll have a nuclear response. This is a regime that's the most dangerous in the world today. And we have a president who called them during the last campaign a little country that we don't have to worry about. Well, I have been out sounding the alarm in Iran for a long time. I understand that situation better than anybody. I've written about it, I've read about it, I've studied it, and I understand the existential threat, not just that Iran is to Israel, but to the entire situation in the Middle East. Iran with a nuclear weapon means Saudi Arabia and Turkey will not be far behind, because those Sunni governments are not going to let a Shiite regime have a nuclear weapon in that region of the world. You will lead to an arms race. You will lead to a proliferation of terror that we have never seen, and it will be, yes, here in Boise, not just in New York and Washington. They are serious about disrupting and dismantling their threat, the threat that they believe is to their country. They have these grand illusions, or some would say delusions, about what they want to accomplish for their theology. This is not the Soviet Union. This is not a country that believes, well, actually doesn't believe in anything. They were atheists. And so mutual assured destruction worked. Why? Because they didn't want to die. Because when atheists die, that's it. Or maybe better stated, they think that's it. So mutual assured destruction worked. You bomb us, we destroy you, you're dead. They don't want to be dead. Well, Iranians, the government of Iran, you know what the president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, says about the principal virtue of the Islamic Republic of Iran? What they say it is? Martyrdom. If you look at their eschatology, their end of times ideology on their 12th Imam, the return of the Mahdi, they believe that these end of times is a good thing for them. That's the time they will conquer the world and rule it for Allah, which they are destined to do. So mutual assured destruction to them, bringing about Armageddon for them, is not something that is a deterrent. It is an inducement. That's why they can't have a nuclear weapon. That's why Democrats and Republicans for years, Democrats are not hawkish on stopping folks from getting nuclear weapons, particularly if they have to use any kind of force. But most Democrats are, not this president. Why? Because they understand what most folks in America don't understand. Why? Because our leaders won't tell them. Particularly this president who denies that we have any problem with anybody who practices the Islamic faith. That's what he says. And he, in fact, encouraged this Arab Spring. He's encouraged now the Muslim Brotherhood to be present and dominant in two countries that are now hostile to Israel and the United States, that are persecuting Christians, that are disrupting the balance in the Middle East. Why? Because, well, these are just people who are interested in power. They don't have any real deep theological interests. Well, you get to see how the president sees the radical Islamists by how he acts toward people of faith in this country. See, he doesn't really believe that those theocrats in Iran actually believe what they say they believe. They can't possibly believe that. They're just interested in power and exercising their authority, and they use religion as a tool. Sort of like, the Catholic Church here in America, who really doesn't believe what they say they believe with respect to birth control and things like that. They're just using it to try to control people. And therefore, we can run over their rights because the government knows better of what people want. This is the way the president sees faith. I mentioned the Catholic Church, but there was actually even a more outrageous thing the president tried to do that has not gotten much attention in the media. Surprise, surprise. In the Obamacare bill, what President Obama is doing in the implementation of Obamacare is telling religious organizations, you will do what the government tells you to do. We have established the right to health care, and we will tell you how to exercise that right. Careful when the government says they are the creator of rights. Because any right the government creates, the government can take away. All right? Well, there was another case on religious liberty. It was decided by the Supreme Court less than a month ago, called Hosanna Tabor was the name of the case. How many people are familiar with that case? Just curious. Okay, less than 5%. Media does not want to tell you what the Obama administration did in this case. This had to do with the, quote, ministerial exception to employment discrimination cases. And the Obama administration went before the United States Supreme Court in a case where someone filed an employment discrimination claim against a Jewish organization because, well, they didn't agree with the Jewish faith. And this was a minister position. And so the Jews felt that, well, maybe we should have someone who's Jewish who agrees with us in our faith to have people minister to our people. And maybe asking too much. Well, it turned out it was asking too much. Because the Obama administration argued before the United States Supreme Court that there should be no ministerial exception. That the ministerial exception is overly broad, and that the government can force religious people, religious organizations, to hire anybody who qualifies, whether they agree with their faith or not. They even argued, believe it or not, I think it was Justice Kagan who said, now listen to this, asked the solicitor for the United States, President Obama's counsel, are you saying that you could force the Catholic Church to hire women priests? Answer, yes. What planet do they live on up there in the White House? Well, here's the amazing thing. They lost the case 9-0. The shocking thing was, 2 weeks later, they then did this with HHS and these rules on insurance. They don't learn their lesson. And they're going to fight. They're going to fight because they believe government should be able. Their secular values should be imposed on people of faith who are, well, out of sync with the times. Right? This is why you get from the left this idea of a living Constitution. Right? The Constitution must change. You saw Justice Ginsburg the other day when she was asked the question. I don't know if you saw this. Justice Ginsburg asked the question, would you recommend the United States Constitution to a country that is developing a new government? Her answer was, no, I would not. This is a Supreme Court justice whose job it is to protect and defend the Constitution, who says that she wouldn't recommend it, that the South African Constitution is better. This is what we're dealing with, folks. This is why this election is so fundamental. Are economics important? You bet they are. Job creation important? You bet. Do we have to reduce the size and scale of government? Absolutely. Let's give it up. Come on. The reason we have to reduce the size and scale of government is to protect your freedom. That's what this is about. This election ultimately is about freedom. And the bigger the government is, the smaller you become. It is a zero-sum game, folks. And we have a president who is spending us into oblivion. He has spending, his budget just came out yesterday, and he proposed a budget that, again, for the 4th year in a row, spends almost 25% of our overall economy. 25% is what government will make up in our overall economy. That is the highest level ever, well, since World War II, since we were in the Second World War. When our country was in full-scale war, we spent more. But no other time in our government's history did we do that. And now 4 years in a row, we've seen 25%, almost 25% of gross domestic product in spending. We've seen trillion-dollar deficits. President Obama in 4 years is going to add over $5 trillion to the national debt. Oh, it doesn't cost us that much now because interest rates are so low. Imagine what our national debt cost us 7% of the overall budget. Imagine when interest rates double, which still are low, and then triple, which still will be relatively low. Imagine what that does to the deficit of this country once this economy with a new president starts growing. We are going to be in a huge problem. That we are just twiddling our thumbs with this president. He's ignoring it. And he's telling you all it doesn't matter. In fact, he's telling you that we need government to run these huge deficits in order for us to have a strong economy. How many think we have a strong economy right now? This president is leading us to a road he's trying to do. This is right out of the FDR playbook. Continue to grow government, to get more and more people on government programs, more and more dependency. We have almost half the people in this country don't pay taxes, and almost half now receive some sort of government benefit. We're reaching a tipping point, folks, when those who pay are the minority and those who receive are the majority. Freedom in election process is not something people will care about. They'll care about whether they get their piece. This is what it's all designed to do. Gradually, slowly erode your freedom and increase your dependency on government. That's why this election is the most important election in your lifetime. This is a chance for Americans to stand up and say, we will be free. And we can do it. We can do it. What we need is a leader that trusts you. People say, how are you going to bring people together? How about being honest with them? How about just tell them the truth about the situation we're in? Is it tough? Yes. Is America up to the task? You bet we are. You bet we are. I have no doubt that if you level with the American public about the severity of the problems we're dealing with this size and scale of government, with our economy and the overburdened economy that we have from government regulation, and we just lay out the facts to folks, and we remind Americans who we are, how we built this great country. Ronald Reagan, when he left office in 1988, in his farewell address, go back and read the last few paragraphs. You know what he was most concerned about leaving office? Was that Americans were forgetting who we are and where we came from. That we weren't teaching real American history. Weren't teaching what were the foundational elements and principles of our country that allowed this country to grow unlike any other country in the history of the world. Well, everywhere I go across this country, I talk about that. I try to remind people. I carry this document with me. Everybody knows we got the Constitution of the United States, right? And this is a vitally important document. This is the Operator's Manual of America. It's important to understand this document in connection with a document that preceded it. Because without the document that preceded it, this Constitution, in a sense, could be even a dangerous document. What was the document that preceded it, that formed the real basis of America? Not the how of America, that's the Constitution, but the why of America. The Declaration of Independence. See, you folks in Idaho know these things. The heart of American exceptionalism, what makes us different than any other country previous or since, is that our country was founded on this real phrase that was at the heart of the Declaration. And I'm sure you still teach that here in Idaho. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their with certain unalienable rights. And that is who we are. That's where our rights come from. That's what made us the greatest country in the history of the world. We have a Constitution that was put in place many years later whose objective was to protect those rights. Because our founders believed if we protected those rights, that we could in fact trust ordinary average Americans. Now think about this. Our founders came and were rooted in the nobility of England, of privileged classes, real classes. You read the Constitution, there are no classes in America. There's no titles or nobility in America. They wanted nothing to do with that. But that's where they came from. And yet they were able to do this revolutionary thing and say, we're going to trust all Americans. We're going to create equality. Now, we came up short at first, but the principles of the Declaration didn't. They were pure. The Constitution was there to try to protect those rights. And what happened? What happened was that Americans that had a government that believed in them, that was limited, so they could go out and pursue their dreams, and form families, form churches, community organizations. Why? Because government was limited. You wanted help out there on the frontier. You formed groups, you formed societies and associations and little schools and other types of organizations to help people. Because you didn't look to the federal government to help you with anything. You didn't even look to the state government. We built a society from the bottom up, using people's ingenuity, risk-taking, hard work, education. And we transformed the world. Government was limited. Federal government was tiny, teeny tiny. Even 100 years ago, there wasn't much to the federal government. And America went through an industrial revolution that transformed the world. And an additional revolution is, as we've seen in the technology revolution. America, at the time of America, life expectancy was 35 years of age when we were born in 1776. Exactly what it was at the time of Jesus Christ. 1,800 years and the human condition did not change. In 235 years, because we had a government that believed in you and gave you the protection so you could exercise your God-given rights. Life expectancy has more than doubled. The poorest people in America today would be considered the wealthiest of people even 50 years ago. We are the greatest country in the history of the world. No one has done what we've done. No one has done what we've done. Yet, there are people in Washington. There are people around this country, mostly in universities, Hollywood, corporate boardrooms, sadly, who believe that that time has passed, that things are just too complex, and we need those who are smarter, who are the elite in society to be able to manage our affairs. I'll give you an example. Medicare. Medicare. We have Paul Ryan's reform of Medicare. Paul Ryan's reform of Medicare is, well, how many people here, if you were on Medicare, would like to have the same health care plan that members of Congress have? Raise your hand. Right? Guess what Paul Ryan's plan is modeled after? Members of Congress plan. It is the same model, exactly the same. It says, because members of Congress have the same plan as every federal employee, which is a pretty good plan. Federal government says we're going to pay you so much. You go out and you pick from a booklet about this thick of all these different health plans. Some are more expensive if you want higher levels of care. Some are less expensive if you want less choices, generic drugs, things like that. But you pick and choose. If you want to pay more, you get more expensive. You want to pay less, you pay less. Some you don't have to pay at all. Government covers all the costs. That's what Paul Ryan wants to do. Give every senior the opportunity to go out and pick the plan that best fits their economic condition, with a subsidy for low-income individuals for Medicare, which is higher, subsidy for higher-income seniors, lower. So it gives everybody a pretty good opportunity to go out and get what they need, what they think they need. President Obama and the Democratic National Committee have termed this plan as throwing grandma off a cliff. Why? Why do they term it throwing grandma off a cliff? Because you are incapable of freedom. Because they don't believe that you can handle this. They don't believe that you can make these decisions. They need to make these decisions for you. Because if you are left to make decisions, you will obviously jump off a cliff. Don't you see how they see you? How they look down their nose at the average Americans. These elite snobs. Well, you here in Idaho have an opportunity. You got a caucus coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm told, on March 6th. Well, you have an opportunity to go to that caucus. That's good. That's one. And you have an opportunity to nominate someone who will take it to President Obama on the core issues of the day, who will be able to take it to him on Obamacare. Why? Because I've never supported a top-down government-run healthcare system like others in this race have. I haven't supported a top-down bailout of the financial services sector like others in this race have. When it was all the rage, and the NBC Peacock was green, because we were all concerned about the science of man-made global warming. When everybody was running for the hills because there was real climate science that showed man's impact on the warming and cooling of the planet. I didn't run and sit on a couch next to anybody on television. I didn't pass as governor the first cap on carbon emissions in the history of the country. I stood and said, this isn't climate science, this is political science. And guess who turned out to be right? I give credit to the other folks in this campaign. At least they've come to their senses. The president still believes this garbage. Why? Because this is how the left wants to control. This is how they want to control. If they can control your energy consumption, healthcare is just another drop in the bucket. They can control your energy consumption, which is what they want to do. Why? You can't be trusted with freedom. You can't. It just doesn't work anymore, folks. If you want this to be the debate in this upcoming election about how the jobs in this country have left because businessmen and women simply cannot handle government micromanaging every single aspect of their business and grow their business, folks who are entrepreneurs and risk takers and investors, people who want to go out and create economic activity, are sick and tired of being beat up by a president as being bad because you want to do something that's good for your community and create jobs. People are just sick and tired of being castigated, regulated, and be seen as the villain in America, when what they're trying to do is provide for themselves and their families, and even more, try to help you provide for yourselves and your family. This is the most important election of your lifetime. Fundamental freedom is at stake in America. I talk about the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence ends with a phrase: we pledge our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. And a group of men signed that at a time when the American military was, well, not much of a military. And the British Army and Navy were the most powerful the world had ever seen. Imagine signing that document. You're sitting in a country and you have now declared a revolution against the most powerful military in the world. And you got nothing but a ragtag group of volunteers with muskets. Well, they believed. They believed. And they went out and did extraordinary things. They did pledge their lives. They put their real lives on the line. No one is asking you to put your life on the line right now for this election. Although I will say we need to thank God every day for the men and women who put the uniform on of the American military and do pledge their lives for this country. And I'm not asking you to pledge your fortunes. Although if you go to ricksantorum.com, but we are talking about your honor. You've been given a great gift, a great inheritance in your own family. You stand on the shoulders of your ancestors. And you have to uphold the honor of your family. It's not a word we hear a lot of in America anymore, honor. We tend to try to have folks tell us that's sort of one of those old, almost antiquated terms that really doesn't apply to America anymore. But you know it does. You have that honor of being people here in Boise. of what your forefathers have built here and in the state of Idaho. And of course, you're Americans. And you've been given a great gift of this country. And what will happen if this country is a country that is diminished during the time that you spent here? How will that reflect on the honor, on your honor, on how your children will see what you have given to them? With honor comes the word duty. We have a duty. It's not a sacrifice. I don't like that term. We have a duty to leave this country better than what we found it. I believe if we are unsuccessful in this election, that we will have failed in that duty, and it will have horrendous consequences for this country. Margaret Thatcher said when she left the prime ministership of England that she was never able to do what Reagan did in turning back the tide of socialism and statism in the UK. And she said the reason? People's addiction to the British national healthcare system. Once the government has its control of your health and your life, then you will be paying tribute to them, irrespective of the quality of health that you get, because that will be the only option for you, unless you have resources to go somewhere else. And with America gone, where else will you go? It will be the end of the great experiment in ordered liberty and free people. Look at the Conservative Party in Britain right now. It's to the left of the Democratic Party in this country. We will be the last stand. That's why this election is so critical, and that's why your vote coming up in a few weeks is so important, that we get it right, Idaho. That we put our delegates in place to make sure that the person who can best make the argument, not to be the best manager of America or the best think tank, but to be a leader who paints a vision for what we can be and what we can leave to the next generation. That's what every election is about. It's about the future. I believe, I know what the people of Idaho will do. We believe. I know. But go out in a few weeks and speak loudly and strongly that you want someone who reflects your values, not just reflects them, but feels them from here. Doesn't have to read them off a teleprompter. You go out on March 6th and you give us a big win here in Idaho. You get us those delegates. There are more delegates at stake here than in South Carolina and Iowa combined. Almost as many as in the state of Florida. This is a big delegate haul, folks. And you can have a huge impact on March 6th. All right, I'm going to stop right there, and we have microphones set up, and I want to take a few of your questions, and we can have a little time together, and then we'll get a chance to say hi to folks afterwards. But go ahead and stand up and grab the microphone. There's one here, and there's one over here, so just line up, and we'll take some questions. I've done 800, and I forget now, I've lost track, 800 and some town hall meetings so far this year. So I think it's important, if you're going to go out and ask people for the vote, that you stand and you tell people exactly what you feel and why you feel it, and then answer the specific questions that people have in order to make sure that they know that, well, you agree with them on the issues that are important to them. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, Mr. Santorum. My name's Jeannie.
Hi, Jeannie.
I love you with all my heart, and
Oh.
I've been praying for you since my first day I laid eyes on you. My husband and I adore you.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad my daughter was here to hear that.
You are definitely number one for all of us.
All right, thank you.
We love you. We like you. We
All right,
vote
your
for
question.
you.
All right, your question. You're going to make me blush.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you how much we all
Oh, okay.
love
Well,
you.
thank you. Would you like to second that? Or no, I'm just sorry. Would you?
With great respect, going beyond the rhetoric, great stump speech, but I would like to know specifics of their top 3 issues that you want to address and how you're distinguished from the other candidates in order to affect change. Could be energy policy, it could be foreign policy, it could be educational pursuits. How are you going to get the private sector to start circulating the money again? What are you going to do that's going to change the ship of state?
Well, that's a lot to cover, but let me try to give you the top 3. Well, I'll mention, you mentioned foreign policy. I mean, my experience on foreign policy is better than anybody in this race. Served 8 years on the Armed Services Committee, worked on national security issues both in Congress and after Congress, have laid out a detailed plan on how we can stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. No one else has done that, and have been very specific about that. Put forth a 10-point plan, including everything. But the most important thing we can do in Iran is we need to replace the government of Iran. And we need to have a policy in place to support support people in that country. When I say replace them, I don't mean a military action. None of the 10 points I have say that there's going to be a military action to replace their government. But their government is very unpopular. In the streets of Iran, America is a very popular country. Why? Because we point out to the people of Iran the evil regime that it is. And this president has not done that. This president has coddled them. And therefore there is a distrust as to whether we will side with the democracy movement. Why? Because we didn't 3 years ago. We left them out there to be killed and tortured as they continue to be killed and tortured. So it's a great contrast between me and President Obama and between those in the race. We're looking for contrasts. I mentioned health care, another contrast. Huge between me and President Obama. Not so much with the rest of the field. You talk about, I mentioned energy. You mentioned energy. I talked about cap and trade. That's what cap and trade affects. It affects fossil fuel and energy production. The president sees all of these riches of gas and oil and coal and sees them as a liability, a problem. Energy is tied to the quality of life of a society. The cheaper and more affordable energy and more available energy is, the higher the quality of life. And so if you look at our energy plan, I'm not a Texas oil man. My grandfather was a coal miner, and I grew up in a steel town, in a blue-collar roots. I can go out to the American public and talk about just that, how this is going to impact your life. We have Mexico right now that gives us about 1.5 million barrels of oil a day. In 5 years, that'll be gone. Venezuela gives us 2.5 million. In less than 5 years, that'll be gone. Why? Because China is building a refinery there. And they're going to take that to China instead of having to send their crude to the United States to refine. Mexico is going to get rid of their 1.5 million barrels. Why? Because they're depleting their fields, and they are going to be an importer of oil pretty soon. Alaska, 500,000 barrels a day coming down that pipeline. In less than 10 years, that pipeline will be gone because we'll have under 350,000 barrels a day, and that means the pipeline won't flow. And so we'll lose almost 5 million barrels a day. In light of that, the president knows this, and yet, what is he doing? We have the Keystone Pipeline that could help supply more oil to this country. And the President of the United States wants that oil to go off to Western Canada and where? To China. what could he possibly be thinking? You're talking about a diminution of the quality of life in this country. Huge impact on our ability to provide for ourselves and our common defense. So yes, there are differences and there are specifics of things that we need to do that I am the best position in this race to make the case against Barack Obama versus the rest of the field. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, the numbers that the media gave us put you ahead, even though they said you were even with Mr. Romney. And why in the debates do the Republicans allow the liberal media to select our front runner? We need a Republican debate so we could get your message out. We also need to have a ice-cold moderator like...
I wouldn't describe him as ice-cold.
Like Ann Coulter.
Ice-cold in many ways, not in that way.
And we also need a Republican question pool. We don't need to know how bad somebody's campaign is running. We need facts. We need to know who can fix the problem.
Well, thank you. We actually had a debate like that in Iowa, in Des Moines. It was sponsored by the Family Research Council state organization called the Family Leader. And there were 6 of us at the debate. Romney and Huntsman did not participate. But it was a round table right before Thanksgiving. The moderator was Frank Luntz. And if you get a chance to go back and look at that online, you'll see it. And what they told us was an hour-and-a-half debate. Here's what they told us. No 1-minute answers, no 30-second response. Here's what they said. You have 18 minutes. If you want to take all your 18 minutes answering one question, go ahead, but you got 18 minutes. And you decide yourself how long you want to answer your questions. But once your time is up, then we're not going to call on you anymore. And guess what? It was the best debate of the entire time because people got to give the answer that they thought was important, spend the time on ones that they cared about, and I think people got a chance to know the candidates and get some insights into them. So I'd love to see something like that again, where you had someone who really just said, let's have an interaction, let not be the moderator, the person who's dictating the debate, but let the candidates interact so you can get a better sense of who they are. Yes, sir.
I really need about 10 or 12 questions, but they're probably not going to let me have that.
You're right.
I'm going to try and slip in 2, though. You preached to the choir here tonight. Personally, I think the nomination's yours the day you start giving the same talk every time you're on TV and every hall you enter. Forget those other 3 guys. You're the guy now. And I think if you do this, it's yours. And then one last question, and it drives me insane. They keep giving you guys, pitching you these softballs. Where's the outrage over this, forcing these people that, telling them what they've got to do insurance-wise, the contraceptive deal? Where's the outrage? He doesn't have the authority under the Constitution.
Well, if you saw my CPAC speech, I think you saw a fair amount of outrage. They played it over and over again. And I said, this can't stand and it won't stand.
Okay.
Look, I believe that what they've done is trample on the First Amendment, the freedom of conscience, which is the most fundamental of all freedoms. Because the freedom of religion is the trunk by which all other freedoms grow from. I mean, who cares whether you have freedom of speech if you can't say what you believe, right? So you will see me go out there and I will hammer this issue. I will continue to hammer this issue. This is a fundamental, foundational freedom issue. And it's not just, and it's what this gentleman said, it's not just that, but it's why is the federal government telling you what your insurance policy should be?
Amen.
I mean, why should they tell you? I mean, let's set the contraception aside. Why don't they mandate, I think Rush Limbaugh said, why don't they mandate toothpaste? I mean, you know, we all need to have clean teeth, right? So let's mandate that every insurance policy covers toothpaste. Deodorant, that might be a good idea, right? Everybody cover deodorant, right? Soap. I mean, where do you stop? Where do you stop and say, well, the government's going to make you do this and cover this and make you pay for it? This is, and again, this is an issue where I think the Democrats and the left is wrong. They think they've got a winning issue here because this will divide the country because of women and contraception. This isn't about women and contraception. This is about religious liberty, number one, with telling a church what they can and can't have in their insurance policy. And it's about the government telling you what you have to buy. And that's wrong.
Thank you, sir, for coming to Idaho.
It is great to be in Idaho.
It's difficult living in the most beautiful place in the world and have all these national figures sort of pass us by and sort of marginalize us. However, I
remember who didn't.
You're right. Thank you. I do. I've been very distressed since our last presidential election for a couple of reasons. Here's one. I don't like to fly anymore. And in fact, I won't because I have to force some poor TSA agent to violate the Fourth Amendment in order to get through security. And I don't want to do that just for the convenience of flying. But I can't tell you how thrilled I was at New Year's to find out that I had just lost my right to be somewhat free of arrest. Our president or anyone he directs can arrest me or you or anybody else without any cause and send us away.
Okay, you're talking about the national, because I want to get through as many issues as we can. So let me first talk TSA. When TSA was created, I pushed to have a private sector. I pushed to have the airlines do it, not the federal government do it. We lost that battle in the panic of the post 9/11 time, thanks in large part to John McCain, who was the leader of the federalizing TSA. So anyway, I agree with you. I would like to move and will move to have TSA downgraded and have the airlines take control of this issue. This is not something. I can tell you, as someone who flies a lot, I've got frequent flyer miles like you won't believe over the last year. And I can tell you that we should be focused on having a role for the federal government of finding the bomber, not the bomb. And if we actually use the intelligence that we can gather in finding out who are the problematic areas. I mean, I'll give you an example. On my way out here, my wife came with me earlier in the week to California, and it was about a 25-minute secondary screening for her. Now, I mean, they all said, well, gee, we're sorry, but we have to do this. But what does that make any sense? TSA agent apologizing because he knows that she's not a threat, but yet they have to do it anyway. What sense does that make? None. Okay? None. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But that's the illogic of the system we have in place to protect you. It provides no thought or discretion. It's mechanical, and it's not going to work. It doesn't work. So that's one. On the NDAA, look, I will sign a bill that says that the situation for people who are American citizens who are detained by their government on suspicion of terrorism have a right to habeas corpus position and a lawyer and go to federal court and have their case heard.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Santorum, Steve Kimball.
Hi, Steve.
My wife went to Butler High.
No kidding.
And that's what drew me to you. And I've been watching you for 6 years on the Hannity programs and stuff. I like your principles. I like your style. I even like how you dress, buddy.
You don't have a sweater vest on, though, I noticed.
You are an American, and we need an American in the presidency.
Thank you. Okay, question.
My question is this. Obama's going to have $1 billion to fight you with. You've got a media that will guarantee 10% to the Democrat candidate. How are you going to overcome that?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Let's look at who maybe is the best person to overcome that. Who in the race for president on the Republican side didn't have any money?
You?
Didn't get any media coverage?
You and Ronald Reagan.
And was able to, by going out and talking about the issues, didn't go in and buy into attacking their opponent on petty issues, and went out and talked about a broad vision for this country, drew sharp contrast between themselves and President Obama, and in spite of the fact that I got on average 7 minutes at a debate for the first 13 debates, which, by the way, was less than any other candidate in the race, including Herman Cain, who had not been at 3 of those debates, and he still had more time than I did. So if you're looking at someone who can overcome the disadvantages of money and media attention and still be in a position to win,
My point
ideas matter.
My point exactly.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Santorum, my name is Tim Taylor. Glad to meet you.
Thank you, Tim.
I'm impressed with your candidacy. I'm still undecided. But I do want to ask you a question regarding some of the comments you made earlier, specifically the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. In spite of the case that you cited about that was before the Supreme Court that Obama lost, the branches of government are totally out of balance. The judicial branch is anemic. The legislative branch is gutless. And the executive branch is overreaching. What would you do specifically to bring these back into constitutional balance?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you. I would agree under this president that the executive branch has been overreaching. I don't think there's any question about that. But I would not agree with you that the judicial branch is anemic. The judicial branch is wielding power like it was never, and it was supposed to be anemic.
No, I was talking about
the judicial branch is supposed to be anemic. It's supposed to be a referee.
Okay.
It's not supposed to get on the field and take sides. But what we have seen, if there's any branch of government that has exceeded their authority in the Constitution, as our founders intended, it is not the president relative to the courts. It is the president. I agree with you. And the president has assumed more and more power. I mean, that's one of these, you've all heard about this issue of earmarks. And I know most people are against earmarks. But understand, you get rid of Congress allocating money, that means the president has all the authority to allocate money. And Cylinder was not a congressional earmark. It was President Obama's, okay? So understand that the Congress, as unpopular as it is, was where the power was supposed to be in this country. And it's not where it is now. You're right, the president has, and particularly this president, has usurped authority, has ignored the Constitution and run roughshod over it. But the Congress let him. And they shouldn't have. The bigger problem, folks, is the courts. The courts have decided that they are the final arbiter of everything, and that they can order both branches of government to do what they say. That is not what the founders intended. That is an oligarchy that is in control of this country.
So what would you do? What would you do about it?
So what I have talked about, I know this will be popular in Idaho, which is to take the Ninth Circuit and
Throw him off a cliff.
Now, I am mused about the fact of trying to abolish the Ninth Circuit. But there is a constitutional provision that says you sort of can't fire judges once they're appointed for life. So what I would do is take all the Ninth Circuit judges and stick them in a new circuit, which is California. And then let the rest of a new circuit be created with new judges from the other states like Idaho, and which would make sense. I mean, it would be right from a size point of view relative to the other circuits, and it would more accurately reflect the values of the West, not tainted by the state of California.
Hello, Mr. Santorum. Terry Williams. I'm a transplant out of communist. Speaking into the mic, I said, I'm a transplant out of communist California. So I know firsthand the problem with illegal aliens. My question is, when you become president, are you going to allow the police agencies in this country to at least enforce the existing laws that we have, as opposed to telling a police officer, you can't ask this guy where he's from just because you suspect he might be illegal?
Number one, on illegal immigration, we will secure the southern border, number one. It is now 40% secure. It needs to be 100%, not just for illegals coming into this country, for a concern about the impact on the economy and the culture, but because of drugs and violence and jihadists. I was in Texas just last week, and I talked to someone who's a border agent, and they told me that they have captured people who are Arab or Muslim who now speak Spanish. And this is not a surprise, should not be a surprise. There's all sorts of evidence, there's all sorts of testimony about jihadist training camps all throughout Central and South America. You see Iran in particular developing relationships with Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua. This is a serious problem, that the southern border is a porous border still that can do great harm. When you hear, as I mentioned before, what Iran is planning. The one Iranian attack that was thwarted, according to the president, was one that trying to kill the Saudi ambassador, and who was going to conduct the plan? Folks from Mexico who were going to come into the country. So securing the border is one thing. Number two, enforce the law. And that means use E-Verify. We'll give E-Verify as a safe harbor for employers that want to use it. Who use it, they will have a safe harbor in making sure that they're not going to be brought up on charges if they use the system that's in place. I think we can come up with a better system. We will work on that. A private sector system potentially. But finally, we need to let the states have the authority to go ahead and help enforce their laws too. I support Arizona and other states to do that. Finally, when it comes to legal immigration, I am not anti-illegal immigration. I'm the son of an immigrant. And particularly for ag workers, and I know this is a big problem in a lot of areas, we need to have an ag worker program that works. The president's program doesn't. Nope. And the reason it doesn't is because he doesn't want it to. Because he's trying to pay off his friends in the labor movement. And so we will have an ag worker program that works. We have a legal immigration program that provides, unfortunately, look, folks, in America, if it wasn't for legal immigration, we would be losing population in this country. We'd be declining. So this is something that's important for us, to have this wellspring of people who want to be Americans, to come here and add to the greatness of our country. Yes, sir. Okay. Take one more. I'm sorry. I guess they're telling me I got to go. So.
Thank you. We want to thank you first for coming to Idaho, but I want to invite you back after you're president.
Absolutely.
I'd like to have,
if this is the reception I'm going to get, I'll definitely come back.
After the first 100 days, you're in office and the dust clears with everybody leaving town, all the radicals and progressives and liberals and so forth. I'm having interest in the western states. Here in the West, we have several states that are controlled by the federal government, 75 to 80% of the land. I'd like to have your views on turning that land back to the states or over to the states so we can control our own destiny.
We are very blessed in Pennsylvania. We don't have a lot of federal lands in Pennsylvania. We have one federal national forests. And it's about as badly managed as you could possibly imagine. I had more fights over this little plot of land up there, the Allegheny National Forest. And so I can only imagine, as I did, because I experienced it, what the problems is with BLM and the problem with Forest Service and a whole host of other agencies that the states that are heavily populated with federal lands have to deal with. My feeling is there obviously are very important, critical areas of our country that should be under the purview of the federal government. No one's going to turn Yellowstone over to the private sector of the states or to Grand Canyon or anything else. But there's a lot of land out there that is land that can and should be managed by stewards who care about that land. That I believe that the land is there to serve man, not man there to serve the land. And that if we turn that, obviously BLM, just don't, look, we're not going to have the resources to manage this land correctly. We're not going to, the federal government doesn't care about it. They don't care about this land. They don't live here. They don't care about it. We don't care about it in Washington. It's just flyover country for most of the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. We need to get it back into the hands of the states and even to the private sector to make sure that this land is managed in a way, and we can make money doing it. We can make money doing it by selling it. So I believe that this is a vitally important, we do not need this huge amount of federal land under federal purview, and I will be happy to work with your senators and congressmen out here in the West to put a plan together that's going to have a much more responsible management of land in the West than we've had in the last many years. Okay? I would love to take more questions, but what I want to do is wrap it up here. Obviously encourage and ask for your help and support again. I want to take some time to come down and shake hands with a few people and take some pictures. I will take pictures with anybody who puts it on Facebook. Otherwise, I'm not going to take your picture. Okay? But I want to get a chance to say hi to folks and get a chance to talk to a few people one-on-one. Thank you all for coming. I can tell you that... All right, that's it. All right, God bless. Good to see you.